One of the most underestimated relationships that we can have in Rimworld is between us, the players, and the animals we have. Now, what do I mean by this? So, a couple of months ago, I was playing my Save Our Ship 2 playthrough. I was having a fantastic time, and everything was going swell. Then I received a quest in order to look after a cat. Now, this cat was actually given to me because I had paralytic aplasia and it couldn't go back to Earth, and this cat was called Scratch. We named it, we looked after it, we gave it a bed, we gave it a bedroom. Scratch was amazing. Now, don't blame me, but Scratch all of a sudden thought it'd be a really good idea to go for a spacewalk and go missing. Now, if we had today's mod included, I could have potentially given them a bionic to stop them from going on a spacewalk without a spacesuit. Introducing Alpha Implants. I'm super excited to be covering one of Sarge's mods today. I think it's the first time I've actually done it. Sarge is an amazing mod creator and is part of so many amazing projects that I'm super interested in, I think are amazing. So let's get into things and get into the content. So let's start by looking at the content of the Steam Workshop page. What is there and what do we see? So we start off with the thumbnail, tells us exactly what this mod is and what it's called. Very nice. Getting into the bulk of things, we have a description that tells us exactly what's been added by this mod, the features of it and how things work, which is really nice. Then getting into the rest of it, we have enough content here to tell us what's been added by this mod without spoiling what's everything in it. I think this is a great way to show off the actual content that's here without telling us everything. A little bit of mystery here without telling us too much, which I think for a mod that adds as much as it does is a really good balance. We have some compatibility things, some FAQs and everything else. This mod map page to me does absolutely everything I expect from it. Maybe we could potentially have a few examples of some individual implants that have been added to show off individual features, but otherwise it's very, very good. So what does the content actually look in game? Well, from what I can tell, this mod adds 80 brand new bionics. Some of these are upgrades from each other, so we're going from prosthetic to bionic to architect. Some of these do completely unique features. Some of these have been added through all the various DLCs that I have. There are other bionics that can also be accessed through different mod compatibilities. There is a lot on offer here, so I'm not going to be able to cover everything effectively with the amount of time I've been given. So if I do miss a couple of things out and there are a couple of things overlooked, I do apologize. So next, let's go through some of these items and highlight a few things here that I think are very noteworthy. Starting with the 4 architect bionics that have been added by animals. Obviously we have arms, legs, and we have a tail as well. We also have a synaptic reinforcer. This is basically just a brain implant that increases efficiency. Then we have a huge amount of just other bionics and things. The first one we're going to look at is the animal heel got synergizer. This one is really interesting. It halves total bleed factor and also increases natural bleed factor. A very powerful bionic for you to pick up for your animals. We also have access to the classic detoxifier lungs, just regular animal bionics for legs and things as well. Everything is very interesting. We also then have prosthetic versions of everything as well, prosthetic legs, prosthetic arms. And lastly, we have some animal work chips as well that allow them to do work jobs like the actual colonists do. We'll get further into this later in the video. So what do these bionics look like installed on an animal? Here I have 3 Labradors. I love Labradors. I have one myself. And I thought, well, let's see if we can make them better and give them various skills and things and see how they actually look. Starting with the first one, we've just simply given it bionics. That's about it. We can kind of see that in its stats, the moving has increased hugely and so is their digestion. Not much else because it is just an animal. Then moving on, we have a Labrador that has tentacles growing out of it. This Labrador has been given a animal ranged tri-spikes. These are obviously from the Anomaly DLC. It makes the Labrador look just a little bit demonic. And then lastly, we have the Labrador that's been given a animal work chip for slaughter. Now, I don't know how many Labradors are going around actually doing slaughtering, but there we go. So as you can see, some of these bionics do a lot more than meets the eye, changing our animals actually visually and giving them some brand new abilities and making them actually kind of worthwhile using in a combat scenario and working scenario. So how are we going to get these brand new bionics? Pretty much all of them are accessed through the vanilla research tree, coming along with prosthetics, bionic replacement, and there is one brand new research that's been added, which is called Advanced Animal Bionics. There's a lot of animal bionics as well that are also accessed through tech prints that are part of the royalty DLC and things like that. Then how are we going to craft these? This mod also adds 2 brand new workbenches. We have the Animal Prosthetics and Bionics table, and we have the Advanced Animal Prosthetics and Bionics table. Everything is very well integrated with vanilla Rimworld and everything makes sense. Good job. So that's going to be it for the content section here, and to me what we've got here is an essential Rimworld mod. This mod adds so many amazing bionics to our animals and gives us access to so many different ways to make them better in different scenarios. It's totally unique in that factor of how good it is. Not only how much content we've got of such a good quality as well, because it's all kind of tech locked at various different stages. We have crude, prosthetic, bionic and archotech. We can restrict ourselves for various different playthroughs and it's just perfect. There is literally no reason and no way that this mod could be improved. Yes, we could have more bionics added, but there's compatibility with various other mods as well. This is everything. If I want to turn my Labrador into a killing machine, I can do it. If I want to turn a Thrumbo into a harvesting machine, I can do it. If I want to turn a kangaroo or a horse or a donkey just into like anything, I can do it with this mod. The availability to the players is huge because it fits in perfectly with the vanilla Rimworld with all the research stuff, and the Steam Workshop page perfectly advertises it. This is a perfect amount of content. It's probably the most perfect amount of content I've ever seen. So it's going to be a very easy 10 out of 10 here. So next, let's move on and look at the quality of all the items added by this mod. And there are a lot of items to cover here. So unlike mods that only add maybe 1 or 2 items, and I'm expecting extremely high quality on those, because there's a lot of items here, things are going to be categorized a little bit different here. Because there are so many items that are so similar, what I'm expecting here is that everything kind of looks different depending on what it's categorized in, and I'm expecting things to also look decently good as well. So let's get into things and see what I think. So looking at all 80 bionics here, and you can see that I've vaguely tried to categorize things. When I was spawning everything in, I thought it'd be really simple. I got to the archotech stuff, then I got to the bionic things, and I thought, oh, easy peasy, it'll all be kind of so on and so forth. Prosthetics I started spawning in, and we had more bionic stuff, and I was like, oh, I've got no space. But I thought it was very important to show that I struggle to categorize things, because everything looks too similar. Now, yes, we do have 3 different color types. We have the archotech stuff being a little bit more of a greenish, grayish look about them. The bionics are a very clear yellow, and then we have the prosthetics that are a clear brown here. If I say clicked on an animal bionic leg, and then I then clicked on the work chip for harvest, they look exactly the same, but one's a leg and one's a brain implant. Why do they look the same? My main gripe here with the quality section isn't that the icons themselves are poor quality, they're poor textures. In fact, they look really, really good. There's not enough differentiation for the different categories of bionics. Let's maybe have a different color for brain bionics and make them maybe green or something. Maybe have all the actual just animal bionics for legs and things, make them maybe purple, and then have all the brain implants to be a different color. We've got an attempt here to colorize different things to separate them into different categories, but with a mod that has so many bionics, we need that little bit of extra in terms of attention to detail to separate things out, so at a glance I know exactly what I'm looking at. I could have queued up 30 different bionics because I'm going to make a Spellipede into the most insane combat character, but everything looks the same. I'm gonna get confused, and I don't like being confused. I want to look at it, see what it is, and move on and know what I'm doing here. So bionics aside, let's look at the actual animals. Here I have a selection of animals, and I've given them various different implants to change the way they look, change the way they appear, and just to kind of test things out. So starting with an elephant that I've given the flesh whip tentacles to, they're pretty cute, it's pretty cool. They've kind of scaled up in size and they fit the elephant perfectly here. Compared to the Labrador where there was a little bit of clipping here and there, this makes perfect sense. Next I have a caribou that I have given an animal enlarger to. As you can tell, it's a little bit bigger. The quality has unfortunately gone down as a result, but still, it's a big boy. Next, we have a yak. With this yak, I've given them a shrinking implant, and they look very small, almost kind of like a puppy, but it's a yak. Next, we have a turkey, and once again, I've given these an animal enlarger implant. As a result of giving them an animal enlarger implant, we can get more food and leather off them as well. This is going to be really good for farming in the late game. Then I have a rhinoceros that I've actually done 2 different implants to change the ability of it. The animal shrinker implant and the animal range tri-spikes. Now generally you won't be able to put both of these implants into one animal unless you've got a specific type of animal, but this works even though it shouldn't do. Then lastly, I thought I'd test the boundaries of this mod completely, and I gave a Yorkshire Terrier 6 animal enlarger implants, and Jesus Christ, your old lady down the road that's got a Yorkshire Terrier is literally quaking in her boots. The fact that everything looks kind of how it expects, regardless of when I take things too far and do things that are actually unintentional, and it still works, is super impressive. The attention to detail to have everything work here is perfect. Full marks to Sarge for this one. So that's going to be it for the quality section here, and everything works as intended. All the different implants, all the different stuff that I've showed off today works, even when it shouldn't really work and I've gone into dev mode to make things the way I want and to test its boundaries, it still worked. And I think that's amazing. For a mod like this that's got so many implants, for just everything to work is just great, and it's super satisfying to see that it does. But this is all overlooked when I go back and look at the bionic icons, and I can't tell which is which. Yes, I could just queue up the surgery and not have to look at the bionics at all, but sometimes I do want to look in my stockpile, differentiate things and have things organized in a certain way. Maybe it's just a little bit of tism in me, but I like to have everything in the right places, at the right specific time, and I want to see it all look different colors and be all uniform, but that's just me. I get that it's not a big deal, I get it, like I do, but when we've got this many items and this many things that look the same, it just confuses me, and I don't like being confused. So for the quality here, everything works despite me taking it to the next level, which is perfect. And the bionic items themselves, they're good texture quality and they look nice. But we need to just have that little bit more of an attention to detail to separate the colors out and to give everything its own separate category. So for quality here, I'm going to be giving it a 7 out of 10. So next, let's move on and look at the balancing of all the items that have been added by this mod. Now I think it's really important to note here that obviously all these bionics are for animals. These aren't for colonists and anybody else that you can have access to. These are specifically for animals. And in base game vanilla Rimworld, generally speaking, you're not going to have access to the most powerful animals. Yes, you might get really lucky and get a thrombo, but most of the time you're going to have elephants, maybe a mega sloth, and that's going to be about it. And then you have to invest all those resources into those animals and have a good doctor. There's a lot of more to the balancing of this mod than meets the eye. So let's get into things and look at the resource cost and the research cost and how easy it is to access these things. So firstly, the research cost. Now, I think a really big positive of this mod is that all the animal bionics are then merged in with the regular prosthetics and bionic implants throughout vanilla Rimworld research tree. I think that's a great thing for it. It means that everything's going to be accessed at a fairly decent level, and you've got to put in the work for your colonists as well as your animals, but there's no way that you're going to then have to focus on that thing and then leave that stuff out. I actually really like the way that these have been merged. Yes, I could potentially arguably say that the animal implants should be in a separate research area, but honestly, I'm chill with this. So next, let's look at resource cost. Now, in terms of resources, things are seemingly quite cheap. For pretty much every single bionic here, we're looking at a maximum of maybe 20 of a certain resource and a maximum maybe of 2 advanced components or regular components. They are very cheap. Now, you'd probably assume that this is quite powerful and it definitely shouldn't be this cheap, but honestly, you got to bear in mind, these bionics are for animals. These aren't for your colonists that are going to go around one-hit kill things. These aren't for your colonists that are going to go be doing research and then crafting. These are just for animals. And ultimately, unless you choose to get the stuff to control animals, you're not really going to be able to see much benefit of a lot of these items. The only thing I will say, however, is that the bionics that allow your animals to do jobs are a little bit too cheap. I think that being able to allow animals to do a pawn's job is quite a high-tech thing, and I could definitely see the argument for increasing the resource cost for this from what it currently is. It currently feels too cheap to allow animals to do jobs that your colonists can do. So next, let's compare the part efficiency for these bionics. So we're going to be comparing the prosthetics to the bionics, so from one tier to the next. So every single prosthetic here has obviously a lot less in terms of part efficiency compared to the bionics. For example, the animal bionic prosthetic only has a 50% part efficiency compared to the animal bionic arm that is at 125% part efficiency. 50% seems a little bit low, but I mean, animals don't really have arms, do they? Things get a little bit complicated there. So I can kind of get and see why it's at 50% manipulation. Depends on your definition of animal appendages, honestly. Do dogs have legs or arms? So far, everything seems pretty balanced. Some things are a little bit more powerful, some things are a little bit less powerful, but generally speaking, these are animal bionics. Some things are going to have variations. So I thought, well, let's push this to the limits. Let's try and make this Mega Sloth super overpowered, and look how happy he is. I've absolutely rammed this Mega Sloth with enough cyberware to turn anybody to cyberpsychosis and make them kill their family. This Mega Sloth is no longer Mega Sloth. This is Cyber Sloth. And what we're going to do here is kind of look at its stats and see how well it performs in a combat scenario. So the first test that I've got is a group of Thrombo here, and what we're going to do is let our Megasloth go to town on them. And as you can see, it puts up a very good fight, killing one, killing two, and I thought, you know what, let's maybe leave it there and just check its stats and everything. And you can see it's bleeding out and it's taken quite a few hits here. So it's still very vulnerable because it is an animal and it's not got armor on. Looking at its DPS without any injuries or anything, and it is a whopping 42.93 with a 95% melee armor penetration factor and a melee damage factor of plus 120%. This is crazy. Like, this is unfathomably high. I'm genuinely surprised that it didn't one-hit kill pretty much all these Thrombos, but hey, how do we expect to know how actually powerful this is? So for my next test, I wanted to spawn in some Cataphracts and see how it puts up with them. So the first one, I spawned in just one Cataphract, and the Megasloth one-hit kills it, and I thought, yeah, this is pretty overpowered. So I thought, let's spawn in a few Cataphracts and see how the Megasloth copes against a group of enemies. And as you can see, it does kill them quite quickly and does make short work of them. But because there are multiple enemies here shooting at them from different angles and different weapons, it does take a lot of damage. Just because we put all these bionics in it and just because it's super overpowered, it's still a Megasloth, right? It's still not got any armor. It's still just a kind of a lump of flesh, kinda, that's able to take all this damage. Despite us investing all these resources, which would add up to tens on tens of advanced components and loads of plasteel, it's still a vulnerable target, which is very important to keep in mind. So combat-wise, a lot of these animal bionics are very, very good. Now, how about the working ones? How about the working bionics that allow some of our animals to actually do jobs? So here I have a little test set up. Here we have some ducks. Our ducks have all been given the implants in order to allow them to do our jobs. So the first job that we're going to look at is comparing how fast a duck can do planting as well as how quickly a human can do planting. Every single one of the pawns that we're going to be looking at has got 10 in the respective stat and no other health conditions. So as you can see, the human gets straight to work, absolutely sowing the shit out of the ground here, whereas the duck kind of does it a little bit, then kind of takes a break, then does a little bit, then takes a little break. As you can see here, the speed of how fast the duck here is decent, like it does it pretty quickly. But because it's a duck, it doesn't always work. Next, we're going to look at the duck that's capable of slaughter. Just saying that is like, excuse me? Here I have a test here. I have 5 goats here for each the duck and the colonist to slaughter. And once we set them to work, the colonist goes to town, slaughters all of them. The duck, I put it into 3x speed, it slaughters one, and then I missed that, and then it eventually slaughters another one. It's kind of weird thinking that I can make a duck slaughter goats, but it's just Rimworld, isn't it? I think that the amount of time it takes to slaughter animals here needs to be reduced here because the duck just does barely nothing, which is kind of a bit strange. And next, the mining test. For this one, what I've done is I've trapped the duck and the colonist in the center of a little area here and given them the same path in order to mine their way out. And as you can see here, once again, yes, the colonist is faster. The duck actually is surprisingly quick as well. But the duck stops and takes breaks and doesn't want to permanently mine all its life. Makes sense. Next, we have the hunting implant. The human, funnily enough, hunts this sheep real quick. Very interestingly though, the duck is savage and wants to kill this sheep pretty badly. It does a pretty good job of cutting it and slicing it and making it bleed out. Very interestingly though, the duck didn't take that long to start the hunting, which was quite impressive. And then lastly, the cleaning implant. This one I was expecting a little bit more of the animal here, the duck, but the colonist gets straight to work, does some cleaning and does it very quickly. The duck barely does anything. Eventually, the duck does do a little bit of cleaning, it tidies up the shit it's left behind, it does a good job. But it's so long in terms of intervals, like it just makes things there's like no point to use this implant whatsoever. You're better off just getting a human to do it, which will do double the work and then won't create its own filth as well. This one definitely needs some changing to it. And for the very last test, what we're going to be doing here is comparing a Labrador to a colonist. both of them with roughly 4.7 in melee DPS, and we're going to see how well they fare against a lynx. Now the colonist pretty much obliterates it, actually completely destroys its torso, and the Labrador does follow up fairly closely behind with its power claws, but also takes quite a bit of damage. Now this summarizes the entire mod here with this one single interaction here. The colonist, despite having the less DPS, doesn't take any damage at all and deals a lot of damage, whereas the animal with the power claws, despite the investment of resources, does a decent amount of damage, yeah, but also takes a lot of damage. It's a huge balancing point of this entire mod here, is that despite how many resources you put into your animal, it will still take damage because it is just an animal. So no matter how overpowered it could be, it's still just a fleshy animal. So that's going to be it for the balancing section here, and overall I think balancing for a mod that only affects animals is going to be very difficult to decide. You could have looked at where I tested a Mega Sloth with loads of bionics and watched it kill Cataphracts, and you could think it's overpowered, this mod. Or you could look at the fact that I've given its bionics to a Labrador Retriever and it's still been beaten by a colonist with a wooden club, and say that this mod is balanced. The way that you interpret this mod, the way you use it, is going to determine your entire opinion of the balancing of this mod, especially if you use this with other mods that change animal interactions and things like that. The balancing ultimately is down to the player, and me being the player in this scenario, I think this mod is extremely balanced. Yes, there's a couple of hiccups here and there with maybe the resource cost of some of the jobs that allow animals to do jobs. Some of the bionics that allow animals to do jobs could definitely be buffed a little bit. But ultimately, like overall, there's so much to cover here, it's all extremely balanced. But there's a couple of things I did notice, and that's how it is. So I'm going to be giving it a 9 out of 10 for balancing. Then next, let's move on and look at the compatibility of this mod. Are there any bugs I need to let you know about on how this fit in with your playthroughs? Now, in terms of bugs, I had absolutely no issues whatsoever. As you can see from the quality section where I actually pushed things too far and did things in dev mode, things still worked, which is absolutely amazing. Looking at the Steam Workshop page, there's a couple of issues here and there brought up. Most of the time, it's from people not having the right load order, people using mods that maybe aren't as compatible as could be, but otherwise, there's pretty much no issues here whatsoever. And I've got to say as well, I love the way that Sarge deals with people that just write these comments in his Steam Workshop page and kind of shrugs his shoulders and says, well, get on with it then. I love that from him. And then how will this fit in with your playthroughs? Now, because this is a mod specifically for animals, it does almost immediately limit you for certain playthroughs. It does mean that if you're maybe playing with a mod that's specifically about combat, you're not necessarily going to use animals. It totally depends on you, the player, as to what you're focusing on. And I think unless you're focusing heavily on animals and using insects and using dryads and using things like that, you're not going to get the most out of this mod. However, because this mod does have kind of medieval vibes and tribal vibes and architect vibes, you can use this in any era, which is massive for a mod like this. This mod fits fantastically well with any playthrough that's regarding any animals in any form, regardless of any era. It's very easily accessible, but also kind of niche at the same time, which I do like from a mod like this. So for compatibility, no bugs, perfect. But this is an animal-focused mod, so you've got to be also focusing your playthroughs on animals, which is kind of limiting. So I'm going to be giving compatibility here an 8 out of 10. So next, let's move on and look at my mod recommendations to go with this mod. Now, rather than picking a specific thematic playstyle or something to go with this mod, instead I focused on recommending mods that improve the animal experience in Rimworld, which isn't necessarily as good as it could be. So starting with alpha animals, the animals that have been added by Sarge here are absolutely phenomenal. I love all the different compatibilities and things that go with this, and making some of the animals in that mod even better, it would just be fantastic. Next, we have literally any vanilla expanded animals mod. There are so many of these, and all of these have specific reasons why I think they should be there that I can't go into. Next, we have draftable animals. There is a way to draft animals in this mod, but it then takes up a brain implant, which I'm not necessarily keen on sometimes. So this will just mean you can draft up any of them and still have the brain implant slot. Then lastly, we have VFME caravan packs, just to make your animals look even more aesthetically pleasing. So as you can tell, every single mod here is focused on giving you more animals and a better animal experience to go with this mod. Now, obviously, what we need to bear in mind before I give you the rating here is that this mod is focused on giving you a better experience with animals. So unless you're playing with a playstyle that's focused on animals, you're not necessarily going to have a good time with it. So for my mod recommendation score, yes, this mod is an essential for your animal playthroughs. but you've got to be having one in order to use this. So I'm going to be giving it an 8 out of 10. So in conclusion, this mod to me is a quintessential for any animal-based mod pack. This mod adds so much amazing content here for using your animals in different ways, making them feel more powerful whilst not tipping the balance into being too overpowered. Everything looks right, feels right, and even when I push the boundaries and do things I shouldn't do, it still is right. Everything is so well made and well thought of. Full credit to Sarge for this amazing mod. But this all comes at a huge cost. My stockpile's being confusing. Yes, the only problem I have with this mod, the only thing for me that's putting me off a little bit, is that all the bionics look too similar. We have all these different categories of all different things. We have things from the Anomaly DLC, we have things from the Royalty DLC, we have things that are brain implants, we have things that are specifically chem fuel related, we have things that are detoxifying, but they all look the same. Yes, there are 3 different color types, the Archotech stuff, the bionic stuff, and the prosthetic stuff, but we need a little bit more, especially given how many items are added by this mod. But for content, I gave it 10 out of 10, quality 7 out of 10, balancing 9 out of 10, compatibility 8 out of 10, mod recommendation 8 out of 10, giving it the grand total score of 42 out of 50, which is a very solid A-rated mod. Don't get me wrong, a couple of those scores are kind of a given because this is an animal-based mod, like the compatibility and mod recommendations. They kind of have to be that score because just that's how it is with a mod that's totally focused on animals. But the quality section could easily be a 10 out of 10. But the bionic icons to me are a big downside here because if I have a stockpile of loads of different bionics, I'm just not going to tell the difference. But that's just me. Don't necessarily listen to my opinion. Please check out this mod for yourself and base your opinions based on that. But if you have enjoyed today's video, consider liking, subscribing, and make sure you tell your mum about me. See you next time. Thank you.